Listen closely, because tonight is the night the internet stops whispering and starts pointing, and Chrisean Rock is standing dead center in a storm that no PR team, no live stream monologue, and no 30-day social media hiatus can outrun anymore. Something shifted this week, family, and it shifted hard. The chatter making rounds right now is that detectives are no longer sitting quietly in file rooms flipping through paperwork on the Ronnie Doe case. Detectives are parked outside her gym in unmarked vehicles. Detectives are camped near her apartment complex at hours nobody rents parking for. Detectives are pulling up on her friends, her family, her stylist, her trainer, and every single person who has crossed her path in the last 90 days. And if the whisper is telling the truth, Chrisean Rock feels every single one of those eyes on her back, and Chrisean Rock is finally starting to break. For weeks, Chrisean Rock swore up and down on every platform she could stream to that no investigator had ever called her, that no badge had ever crossed her doorway, that the entire idea of her being questioned in the death of Ronnie Doe was gossip cooked up by content creators desperate for clicks. That was the story she pushed. That was the version she wanted the world to buy. But that story cracked wide open this week, folks, because Chrisean Rock finally opened her mouth on the very subject she used to deny, and the words tumbling out of her right now are not the words of a woman who is calm, confident, or cleared. Chrisean Rock is now openly admitting on her own live stream that yes, police have been questioning her. Chrisean Rock is now openly admitting that yes, investigators have been staking out the places she frequents. Chrisean Rock is now openly admitting that yes, badges are watching her every move, and Chrisean Rock is now saying she may need to leave the country to escape it. Brace yourself, because this is the very same Chrisean Rock who spent every day of the last month telling the world she was untouchable, uninvolved, and uninterested in anything the blogs were reporting about her. Something forced the shift. Something changed the calculation. And when a person who has been screaming her innocence at the top of her lungs suddenly changes the script mid-broadcast, that is never a coincidence. That is a confession delivered in slow motion, one nervous sentence at a time. Let me lay the scene out plain, because the details matter here more than the drama. Ronnie Doe, known to his family as Karen, passed away in February of 2025 under circumstances that law enforcement has never labeled closed. Ronnie Doe was the young man who publicly stepped forward claiming to be the biological father of Chrisean Rock's firstborn son, a claim Chrisean Rock rejected loudly, publicly, and repeatedly every single time it surfaced. Ronnie Doe was pursuing a legal paternity petition. Ronnie Doe was on the calendar to give a DNA sample. Ronnie Doe was, by the accounting of the people closest to him, exactly 7 days away from proving or disproving the very thing Chrisean Rock had been fighting to bury since the day her son was born. And then Ronnie Doe was silenced. Permanently. That is not a coincidence. That is a timeline. And detectives do not build cases on coincidences. Detectives build cases on patterns, and this timeline reads like a pattern anybody with a pulse can trace with their finger. Every date lines up. Every threat lines up. Every live stream Chrisean Rock broadcasted in the weeks leading up to that morning lines up. Every prayer Chrisean Rock recited about karma and cosmic justice and God handling her enemies lines up. That is why detectives are still assigned to this file 16 months later. That is why detectives have not moved on. That is why detectives are quietly, methodically closing every single door around Chrisean Rock's life while she live streams her panic to the world. For a long stretch, Chrisean Rock enjoyed the comfort of speculation. Nobody could prove anything. Nobody could tie anything. Nobody could point a finger with certainty. And Chrisean Rock leaned into that shield with the confidence of a woman who believed she could never be reached. She went live. She laughed. She dismissed. She mocked her critics by name. She joked about karma. She hinted at premonitions. She hinted at dreams. She hinted that anyone who crossed her would meet a fate they were not ready for. That was Chrisean Rock in her comfort zone. That was Chrisean Rock believing this case would fade before the summer heat rolled around. That was Chrisean Rock playing chess against a public she assumed would forget. Then the case did not fade. Then the case sprouted teeth. Then detectives began showing up at her front door with questions. Then detectives began showing up at her gym while she was in the middle of training sessions. Then detectives began showing up at the homes of the people Chrisean Rock trusts most in this entire world. And nearly overnight, the woman who bragged about being untouchable started announcing she was taking a 30-day break from going live, that she was thinking about relocating, that she was thinking about leaving the country entirely, that she was thinking about disappearing from public life until the noise dies down. If the reports hold weight, that is not a coincidence either. That is a pattern. And that pattern has a name. That name is panic. And panic is the one emotion no suspect can suppress on camera, because panic bleeds through the microphone whether the person holding it wants it to or not. Chrisean Rock recently unloaded a monologue on livestream that no attorney on the planet would have signed off on. In that monologue, Chrisean Rock spoke about Ronnie Doe with a tone so flat, so bitter, and so revealing that even some of her most loyal defenders paused mid-comment. Chrisean Rock said the open investigation had nothing to do with her. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe's death had nothing to do with her. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe was desperate, addicted, drinking, spiraling, and out of control. Chrisean Rock asked out loud where his family had been while he was making claims about her firstborn. Chrisean Rock asked out loud why nobody had held Ronnie Doe accountable while he was still breathing. And Chrisean Rock, in the exact same monologue, admitted that she is sitting in a chair across from law enforcement while investigators pull her records and note her every word. Let that sink in, folks. Chrisean Rock has now confirmed, from her own mouth, on her own microphone, on her own platform, that detectives are pulling her phone records, that detectives have Ronnie Doe's device in evidence, that detectives are actively recording her statements, and that Chrisean Rock is fully aware she is a person of interest in an active homicide file. Chrisean Rock did not confess this in a courtroom. Chrisean Rock did not deliver it in a press release drafted by her attorney. Chrisean Rock said it on a public live stream, in front of thousands of viewers, while attempting to deflect suspicion away from her name. And instead of deflecting, Chrisean Rock walked directly into the corner she has been trying to escape. Here is the fracture point. Chrisean Rock spent a full section of that monologue attacking Ronnie Doe's family. Chrisean Rock spent a full section of that monologue implying that Ronnie Doe's household was allegedly involved in moving substances through the basement of a home tied to his mother and grandmother. Chrisean Rock spent a full section of that monologue delivering allegations that, if true, would place Chrisean Rock in the position of a witness with intimate knowledge of a criminal enterprise. And if Chrisean Rock is now positioning herself as a witness to alleged criminal activity inside Ronnie Doe's household, then Chrisean Rock has just publicly confirmed that Chrisean Rock had visibility into that household. Chrisean Rock has just publicly confirmed proximity. Chrisean Rock has just publicly confirmed access. Chrisean Rock has just handed detectives a road map to every corner of a home Chrisean Rock claims she had nothing to do with. That is not a defense. That is a self-inflicted wound. That is the kind of statement defense attorneys spend the rest of the trial trying to keep out of evidence. And by the time Chrisean Rock's team fully realizes what Chrisean Rock said out loud on that broadcast, that clip will already be sitting in a digital evidence folder with a case number stamped on it. Because in the same breath Chrisean Rock claims she had nothing to do with Ronnie Doe's death, Chrisean Rock is revealing that Chrisean Rock knew things about Ronnie Doe that only somebody deeply intertwined with his daily life could possibly know. And when a suspect starts throwing insider details at the wall in a desperate attempt to redirect suspicion, investigators do not walk away. Investigators pull up a chair. Investigators take notes. Investigators ask follow-up questions. Because every insider detail Chrisean Rock offers is another string, and every string leads back to Chrisean Rock's own footprint. Moving right along. Chrisean Rock also stated on that same broadcast that when Ronnie Doe passed away, Chrisean Rock felt nothing. Chrisean Rock said the feelings had already died long before Ronnie Doe did. Chrisean Rock said the person Ronnie Doe had become was a threat to her image, a threat to her son, a threat to her brand, a threat to her peace. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe was trying to diminish her character. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe was clout-chasing off her firstborn. And Chrisean Rock delivered every one of those lines with the flat, drained tone of a woman describing an inconvenience, not a tragedy she was mourning. Think about that for a second, family. Ronnie Doe was the man Chrisean Rock once shared a life with. Ronnie Doe was the man Chrisean Rock introduced into her circle, invited into her routines, welcomed into the early months of her son's life. And when Ronnie Doe died, Chrisean Rock felt nothing. Chrisean Rock said it. Chrisean Rock broadcasted it. Chrisean Rock delivered it as a headline she genuinely believed would help her image. But that headline does not help Chrisean Rock. That headline actively hurts Chrisean Rock. Because in any homicide investigation, the emotional response of a person close to the deceased is one of the earliest signals investigators evaluate against motive. And Chrisean Rock has just handed every detective on this case a written signature of indifference. That signature will not fade. That signature will be printed, highlighted, and read aloud in front of a jury if this case reaches trial. And if the current trajectory holds, this case is on the road to exactly that. The reality landed a long time ago, folks, but Chrisean Rock is finally standing inside of it. The idea that Chrisean Rock had no reason to be watched by police was a fantasy Chrisean Rock sold to her audience because Chrisean Rock understood that as long as her fanbase believed the police were not interested, her fanbase would not question the timeline. But detectives do not consult fanbases. Detectives consult evidence. And the evidence in this file has enough gravity to keep an entire investigative unit deployed 16 months after the fact. That is not the profile of a cold case. That is the profile of a case that is warming up for an indictment. Chrisean Rock, in the middle of that same rant, dropped a line that will follow her attorneys for the next 12 months. Chrisean Rock said, and this is close to verbatim, that any time someone moves against her or her son, God handles it. Chrisean Rock said, on more than one occasion, that she is the karma of anybody who crosses her. Chrisean Rock said that people who move wrong against her end up meeting fates they were not prepared for. Chrisean Rock delivered those lines while smiling. Chrisean Rock delivered those lines while relaxed. Chrisean Rock delivered those lines before the badges started closing in. That kind of language is not a spiritual declaration when it is spoken by a person under active homicide investigation. That kind of language is a paper trail. That kind of language is Exhibit A. That kind of language is the reason detectives have been quietly archiving Chrisean Rock's live streams into evidence folders they hope to walk into a courtroom with one day. And the moment those clips reach a grand jury, Chrisean Rock's public bravado becomes the state's opening argument. Here is the piece a lot of people are still missing. Chrisean Rock is not the only person of interest anymore. Chrisean Rock has a sister. That sister is named Chastity Malone. And Chastity Malone has spent the last several weeks making statements on livestream that, if the whisper is accurate, may prove to be the loudest self-incrimination of the year. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated that she was intimate with somebody inside Ronnie Doe's inner circle before Ronnie Doe passed away. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated that she had been in contact with somebody currently incarcerated. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated that she was in the process of calling in a favor from that incarcerated individual. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated, and this is the sentence that will echo through a grand jury room, that she was about to put a hit on a woman running her mouth against Chastity Malone and Chrisean Rock's inner circle. Read that back. Chastity Malone announced, in real time, on a public platform broadcasting to hundreds of thousands, that she was calling in a favor from an incarcerated party to place a hit on a free civilian. Chastity Malone did not hint. Chastity Malone did not imply. Chastity Malone spoke plainly. And Chastity Malone did all of this while her sister Chrisean Rock is under active homicide investigation for the death of Chrisean Rock's ex-partner. There is not a defense attorney in America who would let a client speak like that in a fast food drive-thru, let alone on a live stream broadcasting to that many witnesses. The whisper making rounds tonight is that the woman Chastity Malone was referring to is a public figure Chrisean Rock has been feuding with for months, a personality whose name has been trending across the commentary circuit, and a woman who has been publicly vocal about her belief that Chrisean Rock knows more about Ronnie Doe's death than Chrisean Rock has ever admitted. The chatter says Chastity Malone was threatening that woman specifically. The chatter says Chastity Malone was announcing intent, not fantasy. And detectives do not need Chastity Malone to sign a written confession. Detectives already have the video. Detectives already have the audio. Detectives already have the timestamps. And detectives already have the receipts on which incarcerated contacts Chastity Malone has been speaking to over the last 90 days. Hold that thought, because the picture only gets messier. Chrisean Rock and Chastity Malone are currently on good terms after months of publicly documented sisterly conflict. That is a fact. That reconciliation happened before Chastity Malone's live stream declaration. That reconciliation happened during the exact same window detectives began circling Chrisean Rock's daily life. And the question the internet is starting to ask, and the question detectives are almost certainly asking behind closed doors, is whether Chastity Malone was ever more than a passive witness to Chrisean Rock's grievances. The question is whether Chastity Malone was a participant. If the whisper holds, Chrisean Rock may not have needed to be present. Chrisean Rock may not have needed to be in the room. Chrisean Rock may not have needed to make the call. Because if Chastity Malone was already on the phone with the person on the other side of the concrete, then Chrisean Rock's alibi shrinks down to a technicality. Chrisean Rock can insist Chrisean Rock had nothing to do with it. Chrisean Rock can insist Chrisean Rock was not there. But Chrisean Rock cannot insist Chrisean Rock did not know. And Chrisean Rock cannot insist Chrisean Rock did not benefit. And in a courtroom, knowledge stacked on top of benefit is a legal doctrine called conspiracy. Conspiracy does not require a trigger. Conspiracy only requires an agreement. And an agreement can be assembled from text messages, jail calls, and one sister's live stream monologue. Let me pause here and remind you of the detail that keeps slipping through the cycle. Ronnie Doe was 1 week away from a paternity test. 1 week. 7 days. That was the countdown running when Ronnie Doe was killed. That was the ticking clock that hit zero the moment Ronnie Doe stepped outside his home. That is the timeline that turned speculation into structure. Because if Ronnie Doe had lived long enough to give that DNA sample, one of two outcomes would have unfolded. Either the results would have confirmed Ronnie Doe was the biological father of Chrisean Rock's firstborn, which would have shattered a narrative Chrisean Rock has spent years defending. Or the results would have proven Ronnie Doe was not the father, in which case Chrisean Rock would have received the closure she claimed she always wanted. So the real question becomes this: which outcome did Chrisean Rock believe was coming? Because that answer is the motive. That answer is why detectives keep circling. That answer is why the case refuses to close. Chrisean Rock has always insisted, publicly and privately, that Ronnie Doe was lying, that Ronnie Doe was clout chasing, and that Ronnie Doe had no biological connection to her son. If that were true, Chrisean Rock had nothing to fear from a DNA test. Chrisean Rock could have handed over a swab, ended the debate in 24 hours, and walked away vindicated in front of the entire internet. Chrisean Rock did not do that. Chrisean Rock fought the paternity request. Chrisean Rock delayed the paternity request. Chrisean Rock deflected the paternity request. Chrisean Rock ran out the clock on the paternity request. And then the clock stopped forever. Investigators are not asking whether Chrisean Rock knows more than she is saying. Investigators already know Chrisean Rock knows more than she is saying. Investigators are asking exactly how much more, and they are asking it with the resources of a full task force. That is a very different question. That is a question that opens filing cabinets. That is a question that opens grand jury dockets. That is a question that ends with somebody in cuffs, and detectives do not spend 16 months answering that question about a suspect they intend to leave alone. Either way, here is where Chrisean Rock's version of the story truly cracks. When Chrisean Rock finally addressed the investigation on live stream, Chrisean Rock did not deny knowing about the case. Chrisean Rock did not deny knowing about the surveillance. Chrisean Rock did not deny that investigators had questioned her. Chrisean Rock actually confirmed the surveillance out loud. Chrisean Rock actually confirmed the questioning out loud. And Chrisean Rock did it in the middle of a rage-fueled monologue designed to intimidate her critics into silence. That is not the posture of an innocent woman. That is not the posture of a woman who wants closure for the father of her son. That is the posture of a woman running the clock down and praying the internet gets bored before the badges get louder. That is the posture of a woman who mistook a homicide investigation for a public relations crisis, and Chrisean Rock tried to spin it with the same tools she has always used to spin her other scandals. But this is not a scandal. This is a case. And cases do not respond to spin. Chrisean Rock supporters keep saying she has no reason to be nervous. Chrisean Rock supporters keep insisting that if Chrisean Rock had done anything at all, Chrisean Rock would already be in cuffs. But Chrisean Rock supporters are missing how these cases actually build. Homicide investigations are not built overnight. Homicide investigations are stacked through months of surveillance, months of interviews, months of triangulating phone records, months of stacking witness testimony, and months of watching a suspect say exactly the wrong thing on a live stream during a moment of emotional overflow. Chrisean Rock has been saying exactly the wrong thing for weeks now. Chrisean Rock has been broadcasting her nerves. Chrisean Rock has been telegraphing her anxiety. Chrisean Rock has been sending signals no defense attorney on earth would advise a client to send. Chrisean Rock is not being careful. Chrisean Rock is being cornered. And the difference between careful and cornered is the difference between walking away from an investigation and walking into one wearing handcuffs. Now let me flip the coin, because the other half of this story matters just as much. The mother of Ronnie Doe is not being watched. The grandmother of Ronnie Doe is not being watched. The friends of Ronnie Doe are not being watched. Detectives are not staking out the parking lots of Ronnie Doe's family. Detectives are not sitting outside the churches Ronnie Doe's family attends. Detectives are not lingering outside the daycares where Ronnie Doe's younger relatives are dropped off. Detectives are exclusively focused on the orbit surrounding Chrisean Rock. That is not coincidence. That is direction. That is intent. That is a case being built around a single center of gravity, and the center of gravity has a name, and the name is Chrisean Rock. Some voices in the commentary space are also raising questions about Blueface. Chrisean Rock's history with Blueface is documented, chaotic, and violent. Blueface has been incarcerated for portions of this timeline. Blueface has made public statements suggesting Chrisean Rock knows things Blueface refuses to say out loud. Blueface has hinted, in interviews and letters, that Chrisean Rock's public persona and Chrisean Rock's private movements are not the same person. And now the question becomes whether Blueface is one of the incarcerated parties Chastity Malone was hinting at. That is not confirmed. That is not verified. That is only whisper. But the whisper is loud, and detectives listen to whispers when the whispers line up with phone logs. Meanwhile, Chrisean Rock's public statements about her son continue to blur. Chrisean Rock has said, more than once, that she is willing to do whatever it takes to protect her son from the shadow of Ronnie Doe's claims. Chrisean Rock has said, more than once, that she believes Ronnie Doe's very existence was a threat to her son's future. Chrisean Rock has said, more than once, that Ronnie Doe was trying to strip her son of his identity. Those are not the words of a passive observer. Those are the words of a woman who was actively defending against a perceived enemy. And in law enforcement language, that phrasing is called motive. And motive plus opportunity plus proximity plus indifference is what builds a homicide file the district attorney is not afraid to sign off on. The reality has landed, family, and Chrisean Rock is standing in the middle of it. Chrisean Rock has told her audience she may leave the country. Chrisean Rock has told her audience she is stepping away from live stream. Chrisean Rock has told her audience she is exhausted by the trolls. But Chrisean Rock has not told her audience the one thing that would end the speculation overnight, which is a clean, verified alibi for the day Ronnie Doe was killed. Chrisean Rock has not offered receipts. Chrisean Rock has not offered witnesses. Chrisean Rock has not offered a location. Chrisean Rock has not offered a timestamp. Chrisean Rock has only offered rage. Rage is not a defense. Rage is a signal. Rage is what leaks out of a person when the walls close in faster than the story can adapt. And Chrisean Rock is currently the loudest angry voice in a room that keeps getting quieter around her. If the reports hold weight, detectives have already secured Ronnie Doe's phone. If the reports hold weight, detectives have already pulled Ronnie Doe's location history. If the reports hold weight, detectives have already spoken with the individuals Ronnie Doe was communicating with in his final hours. And if any single one of those individuals appears anywhere in Chrisean Rock's phone, Chrisean Rock's outer circle, or Chastity Malone's inner circle, Chrisean Rock's story becomes indefensible in front of a jury. Chrisean Rock has been dared, by multiple public commentators, to release her own phone records. Chrisean Rock has refused. Chrisean Rock has been dared to walk into a police station voluntarily. Chrisean Rock has refused. Chrisean Rock has been dared to sit down for a polygraph. Chrisean Rock has refused. Chrisean Rock's response to every single legitimate opportunity to clear her name has been the same response. Chrisean Rock has attacked the messenger. Chrisean Rock has attacked the family. Chrisean Rock has attacked the deceased. That is not the arc of an innocent woman. That is the arc of a woman rehearsing a defense. That is the arc of a woman who has already been advised by counsel that her best play is to say nothing verifiable and let the news cycle burn itself out. But news cycles burn out. Case files do not. And Chrisean Rock is banking her freedom on the wrong side of that equation. Let me pull the camera back for a second, because it matters that people remember who Ronnie Doe was and why this story stretches far beyond the drama. Ronnie Doe was a young man. Ronnie Doe had a family who loved him without conditions. Ronnie Doe had a mother who is still waiting for a phone call from a detective delivering answers. Ronnie Doe had siblings who are still processing his absence at holidays. Ronnie Doe had a grandmother whose home was woven into Ronnie Doe's daily rhythm. And Ronnie Doe was, whatever else the world tries to reduce him to, a human being who deserved a life that lasted longer than the length of a paternity dispute. Ronnie Doe did not deserve to be dismissed on a live stream. Ronnie Doe did not deserve to be spoken about like a footnote in Chrisean Rock's brand story. Ronnie Doe did not deserve to be reduced to a set of allegations delivered flatly by a woman who has publicly admitted she felt nothing the day he died. Ronnie Doe was a person. Ronnie Doe was somebody's child. Ronnie Doe was somebody's grandson. And Ronnie Doe is the reason detectives will not close a file Chrisean Rock desperately wishes would close itself. There is also the question of Chrisean Rock's son. That child sits at the center of every branch of this story, and yet that child has no voice in it. Chrisean Rock has claimed the child. Chrisean Rock has defended the child. Chrisean Rock has weaponized the child in arguments with critics. But Chrisean Rock has not delivered the single act that would resolve everything. Chrisean Rock has not tested the child. Chrisean Rock has not tested herself. Chrisean Rock has not tested the paternity Ronnie Doe was demanding to test on the very day his life ended. That refusal is not a technicality. That refusal is a message. That refusal tells the audience that Chrisean Rock is more afraid of the truth than she is of the accusation. And any parent watching can tell you that a woman who is 100% certain about her child's paternity would not fight a DNA test. A woman who is 100% certain would take the test on camera. A woman who is 100% certain would post the negative results and end the conversation in a single afternoon. Chrisean Rock has not done that. Chrisean Rock will not do that. Chrisean Rock cannot do that. Because the moment Chrisean Rock takes that test, one of two doors opens, and both doors lead somewhere Chrisean Rock does not want to walk. The truth surfaces, folks, whether Chrisean Rock cooperates with it or not. That is the nature of truth. Truth does not need permission. Truth does not need cooperation. Truth only needs time. And Chrisean Rock has spent every month since February of 2025 trying to outrun a truth that has already started catching her. Detectives have begun expanding the perimeter of this file. Chrisean Rock is no longer the only name written on the front cover. Chastity Malone is now formally inside the mix, thanks to a live stream Chastity Malone chose to broadcast during a period when her sister was under active investigation. Chastity Malone's incarcerated contact is being identified. Chastity Malone's phone records are almost certainly being subpoenaed. Chastity Malone's proximity to Chrisean Rock, both physically and financially, is being mapped in detail. And if there is even a whisper of a connection between Chastity Malone and any person who was on Ronnie Doe's block the night he died, this investigation transforms from an unsolved case into a multi-count indictment package. Chrisean Rock's team has to know this by now. Chrisean Rock's advisors have to know this by now. Chrisean Rock's family has to know this by now. And Chrisean Rock's silence on the substantive facts of the case tells the world that Chrisean Rock is not being coached to speak. Chrisean Rock is only being coached to survive the news cycle. There is a difference between defending yourself and stalling the clock, and Chrisean Rock's entire playbook has been stall from the first week Ronnie Doe's name reappeared in the headlines. But the news cycle is not the enemy. The news cycle will move on to another story by Monday. The news cycle will find a new headline before the weekend ends. The real enemy of Chrisean Rock's freedom is the case file that keeps growing whether the internet is paying attention or not. And that case file is currently thick enough to make attorneys twice her age sweat straight through their suits. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Chrisean Rock is not being persecuted. Chrisean Rock is being processed. That is the difference of a single word, but it is the difference between a headline and a conviction. Persecution assumes malice from the state. Processing assumes cause. And detectives do not commit 16 months of resources to a suspect they cannot build a case around. Departments have budgets. Departments have deadlines. Departments have caseloads. If Chrisean Rock were a dead end, Chrisean Rock would already be off the board. Chrisean Rock is not off the board. Chrisean Rock is deeper inside the board than she was 6 months ago. That is the trajectory. That is the truth. Now the question turns to timing. When does the case break open? When does the indictment finally land? When does Chrisean Rock walk into a courtroom instead of a live stream? Nobody outside that department can answer with certainty. But here is what history teaches. High-profile homicide investigations built around a public suspect tend to escalate in 3 phases. Phase 1 is surveillance, which Chrisean Rock has already entered. Phase 2 is public questioning, which Chrisean Rock is living through right now. Phase 3 is arrest. Phase 3 does not always arrive. But when Phase 3 does arrive, it arrives fast, and it arrives without warning. And by the time Chrisean Rock's followers realize Phase 3 has landed, Phase 3 will already be halfway through the booking process at the county intake desk. If Chrisean Rock believes she can outrun Phase 3 by relocating out of the country, Chrisean Rock is operating on badly outdated information. International cooperation on homicide cases has expanded dramatically. Extradition treaties have widened. Federal warrants can trail a suspect across borders with an ease that would have been unthinkable a decade back. If Chrisean Rock leaves the country, Chrisean Rock does not vanish. Chrisean Rock only converts a homicide file into a federal file. And a federal file is not a file Chrisean Rock wants opened. A federal file adds flight risk to the charge sheet. A federal file adds bond denial to the courtroom. A federal file adds years to any sentence a jury eventually hands down. Either way, the current picture is unmistakable. Chrisean Rock is not the woman she was 6 months ago. Chrisean Rock is not the invincible influencer, the untouchable mother, the fighter who could talk her way out of every accusation with a viral clip. Chrisean Rock is now a person of interest in a homicide case that will not close. Chrisean Rock is now a subject of surveillance that will not lift. Chrisean Rock is now a target of investigation that grows more organized every single week. And Chrisean Rock knows all of that. That is why Chrisean Rock is threatening to leave. That is why Chrisean Rock is going quiet. That is why Chrisean Rock is lashing out. That is why Chrisean Rock is speaking about Ronnie Doe with the kind of coldness no innocent person would ever risk broadcasting in public. There is another layer here that deserves to be spoken plainly. Chrisean Rock has spent years building a brand around chaos. Chrisean Rock has monetized her fights. Chrisean Rock has monetized her breakups. Chrisean Rock has monetized her feuds. Chrisean Rock has monetized her pregnancies. Chrisean Rock has monetized every crisis she has ever survived. And Chrisean Rock made one fatal miscalculation, which is that Chrisean Rock believed a homicide investigation could be monetized the same way. Chrisean Rock believed the outrage would translate into clicks, that the clicks would translate into safety, and that the safety would translate into leverage over the narrative. But homicide detectives do not care about clicks. Homicide detectives care about closing files. And every click Chrisean Rock generates is one more data point investigators can use to map Chrisean Rock's mood, motive, and movement over time. Let me leave you with the 2 questions that will decide how this story ends. First question. Do you believe Chrisean Rock had direct involvement in what happened to Ronnie Doe? Not knowledge. Not proximity. Direct involvement. Because knowledge and proximity are already established in the record. The remaining question is depth. Second question. Do you believe Chastity Malone was operating on her own, or do you believe Chastity Malone was operating on behalf of a sister who could not afford to have her own hands on the wheel? Because Chastity Malone's public statements only make sense inside one of those 2 frames. Either Chastity Malone was freelancing, in which case Chastity Malone has just added her own name to the eventual indictment, or Chastity Malone was coordinating, in which case Chrisean Rock's alibi collapses under the weight of a family conspiracy that the state can prove with 3 subpoenas. Neither answer is comfortable. Neither answer is easy. But one of those 2 answers is the truth. And detectives are going to arrive at that truth long before the audience does. Ask yourself one more thing before you leave this conversation. If Chrisean Rock is innocent, why has Chrisean Rock spent 0 minutes helping the investigation? If Chrisean Rock is innocent, why has Chrisean Rock refused to name anyone who might actually be responsible? If Chrisean Rock is innocent, why has Chrisean Rock treated the memory of Ronnie Doe as a burden to be dismissed rather than a life to be honored? Innocent people cooperate. Innocent people mourn. Innocent people beg for answers. Chrisean Rock has done none of that. Chrisean Rock has done the opposite of that at every single opportunity. And that pattern is the loudest sentence in this entire case file. For now, prayers to the King family. Prayers to the mother still waiting. Prayers to the grandmother still asking. Prayers to the siblings who show up in silence. Justice for Ronnie Doe is not a hashtag. Justice for Ronnie Doe is a countdown. And the clock is running down faster than Chrisean Rock realizes. I want to hear from you tonight, family. Do you think Chrisean Rock is guilty of orchestration, or do you think Chrisean Rock is guilty of something quieter, like knowing and staying silent while the wheels turned? Do you think Chastity Malone is the loose thread that unravels the entire case file? Do you think Blueface knows more than he has ever admitted and is waiting for the exact right moment to say it? Do you think detectives are finally within striking distance of the arrest this family has been praying for since February of 2025? Drop your verdict in the comments. Drop your theories. Drop your predictions. Because the next update on this story is coming faster than anybody thinks it is, and when Chrisean Rock is finally forced to answer for what Chrisean Rock knows, this channel will be the first place you hear it break. Stay locked in. Stay loud. Stay honest. And keep saying his name out loud. Ronnie Doe.